do want to turn our attention now to some more of these international headlines that we are following closely. As we know that later on this week, U.S. and Iranian officials are once again going to be meeting for those nuclear talks. Taking a look here at a social media post from Reuters Iran saying that Oman confirms U.S.-Iran talks in Geneva on Thursday. Now, Oman's foreign minister confirming those talks said Oman previously hosted the indirect talks on the Islamic Republic's nuclear program and facilitated the latest round in Geneva last week. There was no immediate comment from the Trump administration, which has built up the largest U.S. military presence in the Middle East in decades, as it pushes its longtime adversary for concessions on its nuclear program and more. I want to talk about all of this as we look forward to those talks. So joining us onto the program now is going to be Dr. Asaf Romirowsky. He is the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East. Dr. Romirowsky, good to have you on.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So a lot to get to here. Obviously, these talks have been going on for several weeks, but the president has also, President Trump, continued to suggest that limited strikes against Iran could be possible. Based off all the information that we have so far, how do you interpret the current relationship and that status between the U.S. and Iran as those talks do continue later on this week?
So let's break it down. The fact of the matter is that we are cautiously optimistic. As you said correctly, we have one of the largest buildup in the region. We have two aircraft carriers in the region. There's a significant amount of air power and firepower in the region itself. And I think that there's a serious understanding that these talks will indeed fail. Iran has one of the longest records of course, lying in every possible juncture. They are hoping from the Iranian narrative that they will be able to move along something of what happened under the Obama administration in 2015. Vis-a-vis the JCPOA, where they lied blatantly and continued their nuclear program. We know after the June war, the 12-day war, that Iran continues, and Iran has become, as close to a nuclear 90% as far as nuclear capability. That's not something the U.S. or Israel will live with. Not to mention the concern, of course, about long-term ballistic missiles, which also represent existential threat to the state of Israel. I think that they're giving it an opportunity as far as diplomatic talks go, but the way that we are set up now, they are set up very differently than they set up in June for surgical attacks over when it comes to military facilities, as well as civilian facilities, depending on where they want to go with this. And let's not forget the amount of civilian casualties that we have seen coming out of Iran under this totalitarian regime, which has been killing its people on the streets left and right for weeks now. So, there's that concern as well. And of course, the basic understanding that the war entirely with Gaza for the past 2.5 years has been part of a multi-front war with Iran. Iran has been trying to get Hezbollah, its proxy in Lebanon, to mobilize as well. So all of these are significant concerns to us and to the state of Israel and to the region at large, to all our partners, given that Iran is the largest destabilizing force in the region at large.
I want to talk about some of these military assets that have been distributed across the Middle East, courtesy of the U.S. So this is a map here. It kind of shows where several of these assets are located at this time. And I want to dive deeper on these proxies that you mentioned, Dr. Asaf, because that is also a major concern. Not only are we looking at these nuclear negotiations between Iran and the U.S., but also kind of the several impacts and effects that are being had across the Middle East as a whole because of these proxies. So when we look at these military assets that are based here, what kind of deterrence have they offered throughout the last several months after they have been moved in? And what kind of change really have we seen now and going forward?
Well, so the fact that we've mobilized troops to the regions and significant military assets, we have 2 aircraft carriers in the region, as well as the USS Ford, including the Abraham Lincoln. All of this presence in the area should give the Iranians clear indicators that we are serious. All along and before the Trump administration, the perception by the Iranians in general that they could try to get away with any kind of diplomacy, and there's been all these attempts where basically at the end of the day we pay billions of dollars with no return, and the Iranians get away with a pass or a pat on the back. The fact of the matter is that after June, there is seriousness that this can happen and will happen when these red lines are indeed broken. To your earlier point about the proxies, so let's be clear here. Iran has funded not only the Houthis in Yemen, also Hezbollah in Lebanon, and of course Hamas in Gaza. These all are direct proxies of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Iran also has ties with Turkey, which of course is also in the region as well. And of course, all the enemies of the United States as it relates to Russia and China, who've been funding the Iranians. It's all part of that larger circle. But what we have here, and based on your earlier map, you can see this significant connectivity of military assets in the region that shows that really the United States can crack down on Iran in a significant way by mobilizing assets at any given moment here. This is much more different this is a very different scenario than what we had back in June, where you had one aircraft carrier. We used the B-2s. We had the Israelis and a joint effort with the United States, also very significant. Here, what we have here is a much more widespread regional impact, given that we understand that if Iran, when this happens, I mean, and I do think it's a question of not if, but a question of when, this will reverberate onto our allies in the region itself, namely the Israelis, the Saudis, Egyptians, and Jordanians, as we saw in the past. And that's where the U.S. will be able to help and significantly help, given the fact that they want to make a clear stance that they will not stand for a nuclear Iran. And I think that is the ongoing consistent messaging, notwithstanding the ongoing talks that are obviously been given a shot. But again, I think that at the end of the day, it's really hard to see how the Iranians are going to follow through. And the messaging coming out of the Islamic Republic of Iran by the Ayatollahs and by others, they are preparing for attacks. They are trying to mobilize their allies, and they have contingency plans as well. So I think that all the signs are there, just a matter of when this is going to happen.
It's interesting that you mentioned the fact that it's not a question of if, but more so when we talk about these potential strikes and, kind of this standoff right now that we're seeing between the U.S. and Iran. Dr. Asaf, as someone who studies really peace within the Middle East, I mean, you are the executive director for this. When we look at some of the risks and the consequences, what are the things that you are monitoring very closely, not just for the U.S. and Iran, but also several of the regions there in the Middle East?
Well, so my belief in general about this is we're doing peace through strength. And I think that part of what has been lacking from the conversation over the years is clear deterrence. I mean, the Iranians, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been, as I said, the #1 source of terrorism for over the past 4 decades, with the amount of American blood, Israeli blood on its hands. Every terror attack you can trace back to the Islamic Republic of Iran. Not to mention the fact that they've abused and used their own people. The Iranian people are suffering. I mean, there's outcry of trying to move this authoritarian regime. We've been abusing its own people, women, children. The abuse of human rights is insurmountable. And where is the world outcry about helping the Iranian people and how they've suffered under this regime? So I think that those are key issues that need to be accounted for. And I think that whatever kind of strikes are going to happen, whether they be limited or more expanded, I think that Iran needs to understand that we mean business. And I think that was a clear message that happened in June. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the U.S. 2 weeks ago, part of the concern by the Israeli side that the U.S. may go at it alone. I think that there's more of a better understanding at this point that this will be a coordinated effort. Given the fact that the Israelis want to be part of it and the fact that they've been fighting the Islamic Republic of Iran through this multi-front war with Iran for the past 2.5 years. It has worked well in June, and I think that it's a good way to kind of cover all our aspects here in all possible scenarios. So that's what you're seeing here as far as a general move. Also, it's important to understand that the biggest tension, of course, in the region is a theological one between Sunnis and Shiites. Iran represents a Shiite threat to all those Sunni countries in the region at large. and not to mention the military option here of how they see their expansive understanding of the region, trying to create Shia dominance. And that, again, it has been counter to our traditional Sunni allies in the region, not to mention the Saudis, the Gulf, the Israelis, fall within that constellation. And all of that is part of trying to help our regions deal with this largest threat that is a real threat, an existential one for that matter.
So, Dr. Asaf, I do want to move on to some of the latest developments happening in Gaza. Obviously, the war between Israel and Hamas we're also following closely. But before we do that, I just want to get final thoughts because those talks are happening later on this week in Oman between some of these negotiators, the U.S., Iran. The focus is going to be on this nuclear program. But when we look at where we stand right now, what are just some key points that you think our viewers should keep in mind as we wait to see what comes out of those talks? Again, these have been going on for weeks now.
Right. So the question is, the significant degrading of the program itself, where we can live with that. I mean, I think it's more, to my mind, it's not about degrading. It's about mostly dismantling the Iranian nuclear program, the ballistic missiles, which of course is a separate issue, and of course the way that they've been operating, and not to mention the funding towards the proxies in the region where Iran has been delivering and been using its proxies for the continuation of the war. And that relates to your earlier point about the question of Gaza. And so there's still ongoing support that's coming in from Iran to Iranian proxies closer to Israel when it comes to the North, Hezbollah and Hamas itself. So, but I think that the question of the ultimate question of as far as the dismantlement of the Iranian nuclear program, which again, obviously, we in June there was a significant degrading of the program, not a full dismantlement. There was concern, of course, obviously after the intel came out that Iran was potentially capable, which they probably did, of removing some of the materials outside of the three major sites that were attacked, as far as Ifshahan, Fordo, when it came to those sites at large. And I think that so now the question is what's going to happen going forward, and I think that's where we are at this point as far as their nuclear capability, and the fact that if push comes to shove, they would use nuclear weapons to make that happen. I mean that's really the bottom line here.
And we'll have to wait and see, I suppose, come Thursday. And let's see even what happens before then, because things change constantly, specifically when we talk about the U.S. and Iran. All right, let's move on to the latest between Israel and Hamas. And I want to bring us out to this, a live image that we have over in Gaza City. So, Dr. Asaf, last week, President Trump hosted a meeting of the members that make up his Board of Peace. Their goal going forward is to come up with the funds to reconstruct Gaza after this war, and really the war that is still continuing there. My main question to you here is, what are some of the limitations or criticism facing these international reconstruction efforts for Gaza?
Well, it's important to understand the infrastructure and what we're looking at vis-a-vis the landscape. Gaza has built itself onto what I call lower Gaza. You have an entire terror tunnel system that Gaza Hamas has built for the past 25 years. These are, 100 miles longer than the tube in London, just to kind of give a visual of what you're seeing here. And these terror tunnels have been the oxygen of Gaza and have allowed them to thrive as long as they thrive under Hamas's rule. And so what you're seeing here, when you're talking about reconstructing Gaza at large, it's not only removing Hamas at large from, the control of Gaza, which to my mind needs to be a demand and has been part of President Trump's 20 points and control over this, but also the dismantlement of the tunnels themselves. Only over this weekend, the Israelis were able to crack down on yet another terror tunnel. This continues to be an ongoing effort by the Israelis. The Israeli Defense Forces control about 50% of Gaza to date, as far as what is considered to be the yellow line there. And the other part is Hamas. And so the concern is that the Israelis, of course, have is that after 2.5 years of fighting the most brutal terroristic war that they have had to deal with, and I would argue since Israel was founded back in 1948, is what you have here is a question is, can they ensure the safety of their civilians in the south given the brutality and the barbarism that we saw in 10/7 that launched all of this. And so the IDF is in that position where they can't leave at this current juncture. As it relates to the board of peace, I mean, again, the question is the amount of countries that are going to invest in this. Are there going to be enough international forces that we can trust that will actually govern Gaza and be an alternative to Hamas? Hamas has thus yet refused to disarm itself, and Hamas is an Islamist terrorist organization. So do you trust them? The answer is obviously no. And so the question is there an alternative that can work out in order to create some kind of peace and calm in the region? And we're not there yet, not to mention the fact that the bigger issue is divorcing Hamas from what is left of Palestinian civilian society and trying to move along into something different than this reality. In the meantime, aid continues to go in. The Israelis are tons of aid goes into Gaza, but there's a larger question about the reconstruction. And if we are going to see collaboration, it would be good to see collaboration also from the Arab world, namely the Egyptians and Jordanians and others, in order to try to create a multi-force in order to kind of move this along in a positive direction. But the red lines are clear for the Israelis, given the fact that they know that if they're not there, then that represents yet another threat on the Israeli front coming into Israeli borders.
I want to take a look at this. A social media post courtesy of the Israel Defense Forces. It says this: yet another ceasefire violation. IDF troops identified a terrorist who crossed the yellow line and approached them, posing an imminent threat to their safety. Following the identification, the troops eliminated the terrorist in order to remove the threat. My final question to you, Dr. Asaf, when we look at this, what's happening right now in Gaza, and also the fact that given this 20-point peace plan, and right now we are in this phase 2, but it does require that disarmament of Hamas. What are you watching closely within the next several days? And is even the disarmament of Hamas something that could come to fruition just to be able to move forward?
That's the big question. I mean, I'm skeptical of that. I mean, Hamas, since the ceasefire began, has tried to reinvent itself as a force of security and policing and is trying to change their name. But the fact of the matter is, even since the beginning, they've been doing public executions. They've been abusing the people. Again, the fact that you see, even though Hamas has significantly been degraded as far as their leadership, as far as the architects of 10/7, you're still seeing the motivation. You're still seeing the ideology. Hamas leadership in going on Al Jazeera TV saying that they're yearning for more type of 10/7s. The motivation is still there. The animosity is still there. And let's not forget, also from a Muslim perspective, we're now also in the month of Ramadan. Within the month of Ramadan, it's been very common to also disseminate these jihadi type Islamist TV shows within these terror networks and these Islamist groups in order to mobilize and motivate even more so. And so I think that that's also another dimension that plays out here as well. So we cannot forget that. I mean, obviously, the hope is that we can move this along, but let's not be naive, and we should not be resting on our laurels, given the fact that we know what can happen and what has happened, and we should understand the threats all around.
Dr. Asaf Romirowsky, the executive director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East. We appreciate your time here at LiveNOW from Fox. Take care.
Thank you so much.